When we talk about global sporting events, we probably want to draw our attention to really two subgroups of events because they really are the biggest ones. We have the Olympic Games, and I've included here an image of the Beijing Winter Olympic Games 2022 because as I record this, it's finished relatively recently. And I've also got here the FIFA World Cup. Okay, and I've got the most recent examples of the men's and the women's competitions. Both represented here. So when we talk about global events, this is really where I want you to put your focus. Now, it doesn't mean that your, let's say, exam questions will only be about these two examples. These are our best two examples. And what I want to do is I want to start addressing, well, okay, why do host cities actually go about doing this? Why would you host Olympics? Why would you host a World Cup for a host nation, for example? And that is, of course, all about the positive effects of hosting. So let's see if we can address what those are. So first things first, it has the possibility of up arrow, that is an arrow, believe it or not, increasing income for that city. Now that can come in various different formats. One of the other things it might do as well is it might improve employment opportunities. Think about the development of facilities, of infrastructure, so that employment ops increase for the local population. It also gives an opportunity for volunteering. Now that volunteering adds skills and understanding into the workforce. That seems to be a pretty positive thing, right? We're also going to expect that there's going to be an up arrow, an increase in tourism, whether that's spectators coming to the particular event themselves, which is very, very common. I mean, I am post-pandemic as I write this, so I guess that's going to become common again. But it could also be that the sort of like the impressive nature of the city or the country became more popular on the international stage, so people start to do that. We could describe that as the shop window effect. And that is that the host all of a sudden becomes very, very attractive. Maybe I'm watching the Beijing Olympic Winter Games. I'm thinking, well, I've never been to China before. I'd really love to go to Beijing. And I go and book myself a ticket, perhaps, and go and take a look at that particular place. We might also be considering like the commercial. Now, we talked about increased income over there, but the commercial aspects of the game, it can lead to profit for the host city, the host nation. It can also lead to lots of sponsorship opportunity, which of course leads therefore into profit. It can also help with an improved up arrow infrastructure. Think about transport links being developed. I remember in London 2012 they developed entire new tube lines. The Javelin line seems to be the one that springs to mind. We also might develop, depending on what the host nation is, international respect. Now this doesn't always happen. I mean, we can have a look at, for example, the Sochi Olympics, which were held in Sochi, Russia, of course. Winter Olympics, the one prior to this, that would have been 2018. 2018 or 2014, I think it was 18. And they, of course, are linked with some real scandals around Russian doping, Russian sort of politicising afterwards as well. We also find that hosting these games leads to nation building, a sense of patriotism. If you're English, which you may well not be, but if you are and you were in England during the summer of 2021, you probably enjoyed the Euro Championships, for example. It developed a sense of patriotism and nation building as well. Lost in the final, of course. We also get a legacy. And we get a legacy of activity. So the host might find that they've now got a more active, healthy population as a result. And we might also get a legacy of facilities. You know, the London Olympic Park is a really good example, a legacy of facilities. And the last point for me on the positive sides of this, we might also want to address that we might get home nation success. Now, I mentioned their European Championships for England. There were obviously matches in other venues as well, but home nation success. We found, for example, in London 2012, Team GB did particularly well. I think finished third in the medal table behind China and the USA. That's a remarkable feat for a small country like the UK. Now, of course, not everything is rosy. We also have the negatives, and I'm going to do this in this slightly light red here to insinuate negative. What are the negative impacts of hosting, and why should a host city be cautious in putting itself forward? And really seems to be playing out because very few countries now bid to be host cities, especially for Olympic Games. Well, the first one is it's extremely expensive to do this. Now, that doesn't mean the money won't be seen again. Potentially it would be, but it could be that the country makes a loss, and that is, of course, a risk. So they could make a loss, and that burden may well sit on the taxpayer. So this may well be an unpopular choice for the voting public. It will also potentially lead to disruption. Imagine if you're living near the Olympic Park and during the Olympics you can't get to work during the time easily, or it doubles your commute time. That might be a problem. We might also get the removal of housing for the building of the stadia or the Olympic Village or whatever it happens to be. We might experience the risk of terrorism. Now, of course, you're going to potentially study this with regard to the Munich Games in the 70s, but terrorism could become a risk. And of course, there's therefore the cost of policing that relates to that, and that really relates back to the very first negative, which is the overall expense of this particular event as well. It also means that government attention is shared. And what I mean by this is the government, which arguably should be dealing with issues of education and health and all whatever it happens to be, they might get distracted from the main issues. Okay, so they might get distracted, start focusing on Olympic sport, whatever it happens to be, and get distracted on what the main issues of the day. 2 more points I want to share with you is that these tournaments are not focused on participation. They are elite sports performance, not focused on participation. So this ultimately is not about health, about all of us, about everybody. It's about the top echelon of sporting provision. And finally, you get the notion of potential embarrassment. Okay, so if the games are run badly, if the games don't go well, that's going to look really poor on an international stage. And there's been lots of examples of that. One thinks of the Atlanta Games in 1996 as an example, and the Olympics really, really poorly organised, and that looked very bad. They made a massive loss as well. So these are some of the negatives. That's global events. Thank you.